Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Renoy. I'm a fashion designer and fashion illustrator. So today I'm going to be sharing with you guys how to draft a basic bodice block. So the tools we're going to be needing are our pattern paper, our pencils, scissors, our measuring tape, our marker for border lines, our ruler, and I also have this my little ruler here. So let's get into it. So these are the measurements we're going to be working with. So what I'm doing here is that I'm trying to draw a line where I'm going to start measuring from. I would have used the edge of the paper, but it's kind of rough and rugged, so I wouldn't want that to be uneven. So we're going to put in our measurements now. Our shoulder to bust point is 10.5. Our shoulder to under bust is 13.5. Our shoulder to waist is 16 inches, and the last measurement is our shoulder to our hip line, which is 24 inches. Normally you can just get your shoulder, your waist to hip, which is usually 8 to 9 inches. So I'm going to another side of the paper to mark the same measurement so that I can have a straight line when I'm trying to connect all the dots. So now I'm taking my ruler to connect all the lines, the bust line, the under bust line, the waistline, as well as the hip line. So with that done, the next thing we need to do is to label all our points, and then we make use of the top of our paper as our shoulder line. So according to our measurement, our shoulder is 16 inches. So since we're going to be cutting this pattern on a fold, we're going to divide it by 2, which will give us 8 inches. So we're going to mark the 8 inches on our paper. At the point where we marked our 8 inch, we're going to mark it a little bit downward, and then on that same line we measure 1 inch downward, which will create our shoulder slope. Sometimes you might need to take it to 1/4, or you take it to 1.5 inch, depending on how slopey the person's shoulder is. So the next thing we need to do is to measure our neck width. So the standard measurement for neck width is 3 inches, and then our neck depth is also at 3 inches. This changes depending on the style you are making and what's your preference. You can change it depending on your preference. So I'm going now to draw the line that would be the basis for forming the curve of the neckline. So like I said before, your neckline doesn't have to be exactly like this. That is why this is just a basic, like a standard for measurements. So we're going to form our shoulder line from the end of the neck width to the beginning of the shoulder slope. And now to get our armhole length, we're going to take our bust measurement, divide it by 6, and then add 1.5 inches. In this case we have 7.6 inches. We're going to mark it at 7.6. By the way, if you don't know how to read your measuring tape properly, you should check my other video where I explain how to read a measuring tape properly as a fashion designer. So we're going to join those lines and then extend it outwards. That will become our upper bust line. Now I'm going in to use marker so that the lines are bolder and clearer for you guys to see it. I'm really sorry that the part of where the hip is not showing, but subsequently you're going to see it in the video. So after drawing all these lines, the next thing we need to do is to put in our body measurement. So all the measurements we're going to be imputing here are divided by 4. So our bust measurement, which is 37 divided by 4, would give us 9.75 inches, which I have put in there already. We go down to our waistline and we impute our waist measurement, which is 27 divided by 4, which would give us 6.25, right? Yeah, 6.25. So we also put that. And also on the waistline we would need to put in 1 inch allowance, which would be for our darts And if you are not clear as to why I am not putting in the under bust measurement, so we normally, when you're drafting a basic block, you would not need to put in the under bust measurement. But when you want to cut out something like a corset or a bustier, that is when you're going to like mark out the under bust measurement. Doing it right now is just going to give it like a funny shape. So right now we are going to join the point on the bust line and to the point on the waistline, and then extend it even to the armhole line. We'll do the same on the hip line. Divide our hip measurement by 4, mark the point, and then join the lines. And now to create the armhole curls, we are going to mark out the midpoint of the armhole length. We'll come in by 1 inch like I'm doing here and mark it. We will join the point from the top of the armhole to the marked point. And the next thing to do is to create a curve that gives room for proper arm movement. At this point that looks like a 90-degree, we're going to come up by 1 inch, mark it, and then we're going to connect all our points with all the dots touching each other. An alternative to this is to make use of a French curve, but for the sake of beginners that may not have all the materials needed, we're just going to do this freehand style. So I'm also going in with my marker to make it clearer. Now we go to the waistline to draw our dart line. So you know that we already added 1 inch to our waist measurement, so because of that we're going to remove the 1 inch. And the way we're going to do that is that we're going to divide our bust span into 2. My bust span is 7, divided into 2 is 3.5. So I have marked it on my bust line, my under bust line, my waistline, as well as on my hip line. So we're going to connect it to form a straight line downwards. Now on the waistline, we're going to mark out 1/2 inch on both sides of the line, which will sum up to be, we're going to mark out 1/2 inch on both sides of the line, which will sum up to be 1 inch. And then from there we're going to create our dart. From the bust line, you measure 1 inch down so that the dart is not going to be pointy at the apex of the bust. So we're going to form our dart in that manner. And also on our hip, from the hip line, you're going to measure 2 inches upward. We're going to measure 2 inches upward, and from there we're going to connect our dart. Now this is what we have for our front bodice block. Now we just need to cut out the block so that we can use it to cut the back as well. Now the front bodice is cut out, and then I placed it on another pattern paper. I'm just trying to line up the lines I used in cutting the front, but it doesn't really matter if you are going to like just draw fresh lines. So I'm drawing out a straight line that is going to indicate the edge of the paper, leaving out 1 inch so that I can use it as my zipper allowance. So all my measurements will be done from this line. One easy way we can do this is to just trace out the bodice on the back like I've done here. Trace out the shoulder line, the side seams, and the armhole. We're going to adjust the armhole later. So once you're able to match it up, this is what you would have. After marking out my zipper allowance, I'm going to create the neck depth and neck width for the back. The neck depth is usually half an inch from the shoulder line, so we're going to mark that and join it with the tip of the shoulder line, extending it to the zip allowance. So I mentioned earlier that we are going to adjust the armhole curve. This is because the armhole curve at the back is not as curvy as the one in front. So remember, we had to take in 1 inch from the armhole line. Well, this time we don't need to take in 1 inch, so that's why I'm drawing it like this in a straight form. So I have drawn a new line for the armhole curve for the back. Now I'm transferring the lines from the front to the back so that I can create my back dart. So it's going to be the same way I created the dart in front. Mark my bust span divided by 2, which is 3.5. Draw a line that connects the bust, the waist and the hip. Draw a straight line. So another difference between the front and the back is that at the back you are going to come up by 1 inch from the bust line, when you're making the front you actually come down by 1 inch. So that is one major difference between the back and the front. So after drawing a straight line from the bust, from 1 inch above the bust to the hip line, we are going to connect them to the waist. Now this is what we have for our back bodice, and then we need to cut it out. After cutting out the back, this is what we have. This back will be cut into 2, and the dart would also be sewn in, will be taken in while sewing. This is the front, and the front will be cut on a fold. So regarding the placement of allowance, when you're about to use these patterns, you have to make sure to add your sewing allowances at the side seam, at the shoulder, as well as at the bottom of your paper, so that you would have enough sewing allowance and there won't be any shortage. So guys, thank you so much for watching to the end.